You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Coomer, and as chair, I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Atlantic Yards Community Development Corporation for Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. Consistent with the policy of our parent corporation, we welcome public comment on the items on the following agenda. After each item is presented and any comments are received from the directors, we allow any members of the public attending today to provide comments. All comments should be limited to 2 minutes, should only address the item that is under consideration. I also note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on today's agenda items, but by submitting their written comments by 3 p.m. yesterday. I'd like to note that no written comments were received for today's meeting. As you'll note, that the final item on our agenda today is titled Public Comments. At that time, we'll have an opportunity for any members of the public attending to provide comments on non-agenda related matters. Please keep in mind that it's our intention to try to conclude today's meeting by 5 p.m., which is our allotted time. So welcome, directors, and I would like to ask any directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda. If so, please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. Would then be sure that you may recuse yourselves from any discussion or vote with respect to such items. Hearing none, our first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the directors' meeting of April 18th, 2024. Does anyone have any comments, questions, additions, or deletions with respect to the minutes? Not? No? No? Okay. I reviewed them and I don't have any comments. They seem very thorough. Okay. So I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
Move.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay.
You're
All in
right.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. I'd now like to ask Anna to continue with the agenda, provide us with some updates and follow up since our last meeting. And as a reminder, this item is being presented for your information, and no votes will be required on anything that Anna has presented. But why don't we proceed from there?
All right, thank you so much, Chair. First things first, I know there was interest expressed a number of times by the board in having meetings in Brooklyn. The plan is to have the next meeting in Brooklyn at the Shirley Chisholm office building. Fantastic, fantastic, at 55 Hanson. I'm sure you're all familiar with the building. And, you know, we reserve the right to have them here as needed, probably the budget meeting, et cetera, you know, when we bring in a number of experts from the agency, but we will have some of the future meetings out in Brooklyn as requested.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's very good news. It's a little bittersweet given that we're just now able to enjoy these spiffy new
Our glow up here.
facilities, but
Great,
I
thank you.
think it'll be. I think it's a very good idea.
Great. Obviously, it will still be webcast for those. And that is great. And then on to project updates. Anything else about that meeting? Great. Okay. So July 23rd, as we know, is the scheduled auction. We want to update the board that ESD is being presented with a plan for a new developer to be brought in. Negotiations are ongoing. The parties are talking with the lender about bringing in new development partners.
Care to name them?
Cannot. No. We're still in the process of being presented.
How many?
How many?
Can't
Even say a number?
even say the number now. Sorry, that's it. We just
Can you at
More
least-
than one, yes.
Can you at least
make any
share the
assumptions you need to make.
Can you at least share the criteria around what those developers are or should
Sure.
have or necessarily required to have as a part of the project? Just so that.
Sure. The parameters for a developer are laid out in the agreement. So they have to meet a number of criteria, years of experience in large-scale projects like these. And these are the rights that we've previously said to the board that the ESD does retain for approvals of anyone put forward by the lenders.
Are there any concessions being given in order to attract the developer?
No, not at this time. When they present us with a developer, I imagine that there will be requests, but we don't have that information yet.
Will those requests come back to this group for our advice and consent and
And-
recommendation, because it's not consent?
Any proposed modifications to the project plan would come back.
Yes.
I want to just add one
So,
clarification.
Right, just, well, why don't you add your clarification?
One clarification. So the collateral that the lender can foreclose on is only the platform sites. So it's only the two block 1120 and 1121. It would not include site 5.
Yes. This is the debt on the platform sites.
Right, just to make it clear, for the record, I mean, you said that ESD is being presented, just so everyone, so you've been advised that a presentation is coming, but you haven't received it yet, or just let's.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, all right, I want,
And can I just,
Oh,
sorry,
go ahead.
so, yes, so I just wanted to make it clear that you're not sitting on current information that's not being shared. So you have yet to actually receive the written proposal from the, okay.
and I just know that the July 23rd is the deadline for the auction, but so do you have a sense of when, like whatever date it is today, 25th of June, like when that presentation will happen and make sure that you have enough time to respond?
Hopefully the presentation happens soon, very soon. And then, but that just as the auction has been pushed back before, it could be pushed back again.
Yeah, I would like to make sure that's clear. I mean, since, as Arden just said, any aspects of this requested approval that would involve changes to the project plan, obviously that process can't be completed by July, was it 23rd? So of necessity, they would have to agree to adjourn the foreclosure proceeding unless they're just going to, bid in their loan without a developer in place. So it seems like there's going to have to be some kind of an adjournment.
I think it's two different things, right?
Okay.
So in our project documents, ESD has the right, and feel free to chime in, but ESD has the right the right to approve a permitted developer for the project. And there are, criteria for that, numbers of years of, experience with similar projects, things like that. And that approval per the document is really separate from a modified plan, with modifications that we all would be talking about here.
Is that an action of the Board of ESD or the staff?
Yes, it's the action of ESD staff. Yes,
Staff,
correct,
not the board.
correct.
I have a question.
I'm not talking about our board, I'm saying.
Right.
No, understood.
Yes.
Right. So in other words, the staff could approve a new developer then that could hold hands with the lender as they go into the foreclosure. But it sounds like there's at least a chance that request for approval is going to include some material changes to the project plan in order for that developer to agree to come in and bid at the foreclosure sale. So they're linked in some way. I mean, I understand that you could approve per se.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that
Yeah,
there's
we
a
get that.
distinction.
We get that distinction, but is
I'm sorry, just to
understood.
point this, because I was still trying to focus on the lender. Are the lenders the only ones that are vetting the developers currently right now, or is ESD involved in that process?
The lender has been negotiating.
I have a question.
yes. Go
What's
ahead.
being done to help these potential developers identify technology that would be successful in ESD's eyes for building over the platform? Because that seems to be the major stumbling block here after 3 rounds of who can do it, who can do it, who can do it. We're still looking around and assuming, and you know what happens when you assume something, that a particular proposer is going to be successful. Or is outreach being done elsewhere around the world to deal with the issue of building over that platform?
When they come in with a plan, we can.
We're not nursing them along, okay? But is it possible for ESD to do its own research and bring developers in on what they've seen around the world? It's other successful approaches to the problem that's slowing this project down for years. Years.
Is that, well, Ron, before I call on you, does anyone from ESD want to address that question?
No, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think when we have somebody on the other side of the table, we should work with them to explore the best practices on this.
Ron?
I want to be clear. The developer in this case is what will they be doing? Will they be building the platform? Will they be building the platform and 2 buildings? What are they basically doing? This developer being presented to you.
We will see what is proposed to us.
It's premature to, they don't have that proposal yet.
So we don't know yet. Okay.
But
What we
but
need-
what you're anticipating is the presentation of a new developer specifically for the platform rail yard sites, not for the project writ large. Okay.
So we know what we need. That should be made clear. And then everything else is pretty much well digested and easily adjudged once presented. But it seems like it's the mystery, the question mark, of how to get that platform.
So if I could just add on to Director Tyus, is the need to bring an additional developer based on the complexity of the site, or is it a financial play? Or do you know?
It's a foreclosure on the debt, right? And so the lender wants to bring in a new party.
Is there anything more on that part of the project, the rail yard sites? Drew?
I was just saying, just a point of order, what was the dollar amount on the foreclosure that they're bidding on?
186 million is
Yeah.
outstanding.
And that's for both.
Both platforms blocks.
Sorry?
That's for both block 1120 and 1121.
Okay.
Does that include B5, the one that's partially
Yeah.
in the ground?
Yep. It's just the collateral is the air rights for block 1120 and 1121, which B5 is included in that. Yeah.
Right, which is so that B5 doesn't require a platform. Is that right?
Air rights, though.
But it has, yeah.
Mhm.
Got it.
Just a clarification, the collateral are the membership interests
Yeah, thank you.
in the 2 entities that have the development rights or have the opportunity to develop those 2 sites, but it's not the actual development rights. Those rest with the MTA.
Oh, I see, okay. All right. I guess, can we move to Site 5? Is that,
Before you do,
go ahead.
it seems to me that what we're relying on is the developer to solve the problem on how we move forward. And if they indeed have somebody who's good and acceptable, that's fine. But why can't ESD begin to look at what happens if that developer doesn't function well or doesn't meet your standards? Is there a way of developing a plan B? And why not? I mean, it's the public purpose of this agency to serve the community and to serve and to develop housing and economic opportunities. And why sit back and just allow a developer or a group of developers who have not delivered for at least 15 years to continue dragging us along and not have anything that we could see as a final product that benefits the community?
I mean, the developers have delivered. I mean, there are a number of residential buildings that have gone up as part of the project, and they are tenanted, and they are, as far as I know, they've all been successful. So it's not as if nothing has happened over the course of the project.
There are 880 units of affordable housing that are not being provided.
That have
The
not been
affordable
provided as
housing
of
that
yet,
has been
sir.
provided is at the top tier, between 100 and 160%. The very low, moderate, and middle income population that was supposed to be served by this is not being served. So you can't say it's been successful. It has not met
I would
the obligations
disagree,
of that
sir.
community.
Just on the
benefits.
record, that the buildings are up, people can see them. The units, the same units that are market rate units are occupied by the affordable tenants. According to the contractual documents and what was the deal at the time, that has been done. If it doesn't meet to your satisfaction, well, that's it. That's a
But
separate issue.
Building on what Richard said, we're going to come back to you with a modified plan for the next phase, right? So, all of these things, we hear what you're saying on all of these concerns, and we can work with you as we move to the next phase.
When you say a modified plan for the next phase, are you talking about the rail yard sites or the project as a whole?
Well, all our documents are for the project as a whole, so we would have to amend those.
And any future modification, we've brought this up before, we would envision, a community engagement process, soliciting feedback, like all that being inputs into what a new plan would look like, which this group would obviously be involved in.
And we would come back to you actually, even before a modified plan, to talk with you about what successful community engagement would look like. And that would probably be not that far in the future that we'll want to come.
But we obviously can't accomplish all of that between now and July 23rd, so, yeah.
Yeah, but the
That's what
community
this-
engagement plan doesn't have to be
Right.
decided
Yeah.
then.
And that's the distinction again between a permitted
Purely
developer.
approving a new
Exactly.
developer.
And
Yes.
modifying the actual.
Okay. I guess if anyone has anything further on the rail yard sites, I'd like to just turn the conversation to Site 5. First, ask if there's any update from ESD with regard to that. So the developer for that project remains Greenland, correct? And are they in attendance today? Do we know?
No.
So I think that is a portion of the project that we just simply can't. My personal view, and other directors can speak to this, but we can't just simply let that sit to be developed sort of in a kind of sequential way, in the way that, to some extent, the project has proceeded thus far, where they kind of do. They have done some overlapping pieces, but it's largely been sort of sequential. And if we were to simply sort of sit back and wait for them to complete, or whatever new developer comes in to complete the rail yard development, that pushes that out really far. And it's, I think everyone would agree that it's in its current state, it's really a blight sitting in the middle of downtown Brooklyn with a huge empty, store site that formerly housed Modell's, and PC Richards is still operating. But I would like to propose a motion, subject to seconding and approval by this board, that this board recommend to ESD and its board that a request be issued to the developer to come forward with a plan now for developing a residential project on that site. I don't know that it was originally intended to be an office building, but I think we all know that's not what's going to get built there. And there has been discussion in the past, proposal floated by the developer to transfer development rights from B1 to combine with the development rights on that site. although the plan has never been formally modified to do that. But they should, they really should, it's time now for them to come forward. There is a new tax incentive program that was recently passed by the legislature. So we would like to see, we're recommending that ESD express to the developer that we'd like to see a proposal for a plan within the framework of the new tax incentive program, which is known as 485X, to develop a residential project on that site. So I don't know if anyone wants to second that motion.
Second?
Okay, second. Is there any discussion? Would board members like to have any discussion on that? Ron, go ahead.
A couple of concerns. That site is at a very intense site.
A very
Intense.
Intense.
Intensely used site. There's enormous traffic that almost on every corner of that site. And it seems to me that it may not be suitable for affordable housing, for families or for individuals. I once walked a senator through Bedford-Stuyvesant in the 60s, Senator Kennedy, and somebody leaned out the building and yelled out to him and saying, "Please don't make the buildings higher than I could scream to my kids from the window." I don't expect it to be 6 stories, but 70 stories, which is the former building, if I'm remembering correctly, would not be appropriate for housing alone. There was also an article that appeared yesterday in the New York Times about high-rise housing that was built in Inwood and in Sunset Park, both of them very successfully. And they were built successfully because they co-located other facilities. They co-located a STEM program in one of the buildings. They co-located, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. They co-located a library and a number of other facilities. It seems to me we should take a look at what are the various different options that could go into that building. Obviously, it may not be an office building, but it could be a variety of residential uses and some other affiliated uses. So I would urge the developer to engage with the community boards, engage with the local community civic organizations, and come back with a plan. Usually what we do is we let them come with a plan, and then at the end of the pipe, we ask them to do an environmental impact analysis, which remediates the faults in the plan. Why not encourage them to meet with the community and come forward with a plan that can utilize the site effectively with great community participation, so that it may seem like it takes longer, but if you do it step by step, it'll probably accelerate the process. So I would suggest that they engage in a planning process that you were talking about. I think Joel was talking about it earlier, in a substantive way, and come forward with a proposal before they make a specific set of recommendations.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion, that the outreach to the developer that the agency does include recommendations that the plan incorporate appropriate open space elements, the types of co-location of community facilities, that sort of thing. Be a comprehensive plan, and that they engage in a consultation process with the community in the process of developing that. And if that necessitates, I was going to recommend that we ask them to present a plan within 60 days, but that obviously wouldn't accommodate the kind of consultation that Ron is suggesting. So maybe let's start with 90 days and see where it goes from there.
But I have another concern.
Go ahead, Ron.
And that is that I read an article which I think every one of you should read, if you can. It came out this morning, and the author of it happens to be in the room. And it's "The Brooklyn Nets Value Becomes a Missed Opportunity with the Arena." Apparently, what Ratner started with, he bought a team for $300 million. It's now worth $5.8 billion. A lot of that value was created because of the investment in the arena. We can't deny that. Yet the public, which put money forward in building that arena, is not gaining 1 cent from that huge income growth. Brooklyn is gaining something, and the public is gaining something from having that site in front of the arena as a public place. There's no doubt in that, in my mind. So moving it across the street is fine. But before we move it, why don't we go to the present owner, who, by the way, also has some foundations, and see whether or not they aren't willing to pay something for that land that we are now granting them. Because where Miss Brooklyn was supposed to be built will not be built on. It'll go across the way, which will enhance the value of what he now owns in the Nets and in the NBA and WNBA contracts he has. It will enhance that. And why shouldn't we be able to claw back some of the public benefit for the public, some of the financial gain for public benefit? And I'd like you to seriously think about that. And I'd like to see whether or not a negotiation with them. It probably means not just opening it up, saying, look, we're ready to move it. If we don't move it, well, you can build on it. But if you want, why not contribute something to offset the affordability or other community amenities?
Well, for clarity, the current owner of the arena and the teams do not have rights with respect to the B1 parcel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So they're benefiting from its openness, but they don't have any development rights.
But they would suffer if we didn't.
Yes.
So I don't want to blackmail anybody, but there is a wedge here to open up a negotiation with them and get them to think about their kinder angels rather than their.
What I'd suggest is that we set that issue. Let's deal first with the motion that's on the table with respect to the recommendation with respect to the communications with the developer, and then we'll come back to your.
I would feel more comfortable if we agreed to do this, then I could feel comfortable in voting for the other one. I don't think we should not try to milk this for what we could possibly get that would benefit the community in general, and primarily people of lower income in Brooklyn.
Anyone have any comments on that?
Timing can be everything.
All right, well, why don't we do this? Why don't I amend my motion to include a plank that would also that would be a second recommendation to ESD, that it also consider ways in which we can first evaluate and then approach the owners of the arena with respect to realizing some value from the transfer of those rights and the essentially the provision of a new of an open space to the arena and the developer, the arena and the teams.
Both the Regional Plan Association, I think a couple of commentators all suggested that a number of years ago, that they do something to make sure that if there is a huge profit that's generated for a private developer, that somehow the public would also benefit.
Just to clarify, in this transaction, my understanding is the value is being realized is the parent company that owns the, the parent company in the chain that owns the Nets is transferring an interest to some new investors.
Some new investors.
And that's where the transaction has nothing to do with the real estate that at the actual site. It has to do with respect to the ownership of the rights with respect to the arena, but not with respect to Site 1. So they're two completely different things. I understand that there's this idea that if construction doesn't take place on Site 1, that there may be a perceived benefit to the people that use the teams and the enterprises that use the arena. But there's no connection between the two in the transactions that are taking place right now.
There's no overt connection between
Correct.
the two.
In
There's
the,
just
in the legal documents
Right.
that, for the
It's-
closed transaction.
In a sense, we need to have a better understanding of what is the value of having that site open as opposed to containing a huge office building formerly known as Miss Brooklyn.
You're gifting them the airspace by moving the development right across the street.
But we're not so much.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a connection between the two.
There's not a direct connection, but
yeah.
there
Not
is.
the ownership, but the air.
And the site has become a symbolic site
Symbolic.
in connection with, virtually every public expression of view begins in that plaza, and then they march towards the Brooklyn Bridge and across the Brooklyn Bridge to make that demonstration. If you were to plunk a building on that site, that would be, I would think, offensive to people who now accept it as an important symbolic site. So
We agree, that's why I said there is already a public benefit, and so.
It's already a public benefit.
Right.
The question is, to what extent is there also an implicit private
benefit.
And if there is, if they would be willing to reconsider some of their contractual arrangements with the city.
But I think, it would be helpful in some way to evaluate if there's a way that we can somehow put a value on that through, I don't know if you have resources or there are other there's state resources and other agencies that could potentially evaluate that, or.
It's difficult because we don't, as a public and as a government entity, we don't have, other than the rights that we have with respect to Site 5, we don't have a stake in what's going on with respect to the ownership of the nets and the entities that have that. I agree that there may be an implicit connection, but we already have a site that the public has an
Well, do you have
expectation will not be built on.
Resources in which we could simply evaluate what the value is of the rights that are being.
I guess we
Proposed
could
to be
go to
transferred
some
across the
investment
street.
banks and hire appraisers and do that, but we're talking substantial amounts of money.
First, I think we have to look at the transaction documents, right? Because we would have to look at the Barclays
Yes.
transaction documents to see if there's even any way
Right.
to do this before we invest in valuing it, if the legal documents don't support that.
I guess what I was shifting to actually a moment ago was just simply what is the value of those rights that are being transferred over? What's their value to the developer?
In January 2018, this board had a proposal to do exactly that, to value that property. Jamie Stein, who happened to have been a colleague of mine, proposed it, that there be a planning and financial evaluation of the vacant site. And so it seems to me that there is a history about that. I don't know why it wasn't undertaken, but you might want to check.
Well, even if it had been undertaken, we're now 10 years down the road and with a lot of relevant market affecting factors having occurred. So
City's Department of Finance regularly evaluates and sets the taxes for property in the city, so they have data where you don't have to stress yourself.
True.
And then also noting, was it last year or the year before? Community Board 8 did a economic study on everything within Community Board 8. So going from Atlantic Yards to Weeksville.
Oh.
So that information may be in there, but I'm not sure because I remember Bridge Street doing some.
Department of Finance, every year they issue 2-year taxation. They-
But I know that one.
You're still a member of
Yep.
of Board 8? All right, well, you can do what you can to get your hands on that. I'm on CB6, and I'm not aware of there having been any analogous evaluation. Yeah. Yes. So, all right. Does everyone understand what's on the table for a vote?
Wanna repeat your motion,
It's
please?
essentially 2 recommendations. The first is a recommendation that ESD request of the incumbent developer that it present a proposal for developing Site 5 as a residential site with I can't repeat them all, but the types of additional amenities that Ron discussed in terms of open space for use by the residents and the public and other on-site amenities, and within the framework of the new 485X tax incentive program. And a second recommendation that ESD explore first with a review of legal documents and then other factors approaching the owners of the arena and the sports teams with regard to possible contribution in recognition of the value that they would be obtaining as a private matter in having the development rights transferred away from B1 and maintaining it as an open public space. So can we have a resecond of that motion?
Second.
Okay. Ron, I'm sorry. Let's further discussion on the motion.
Just to assess the viability of housing on the site, because it may not be the most viable place for our families.
Well, Ron, I agree in theory, but what else is going to be? I mean, nobody's going to build
There's
an
also
office
high
building
rises
there.
all down, that they're
Yes,
building all
and
down Flatbush.
Sam, you know,
With the school that's there. they're-
It may not be
Absolutely.
the ideal place that everyone would choose to raise a family, but there are ways to mitigate the.
But I think they should plan the mitigation. In other words, they may need to go to
Yeah.
school, they may need.
No, let's consider that part of the recommendation. Yes, yes.
I agree.
Okay.
Second, in that case.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
I believe, as Drew noted earlier, there was a community study done for the surrounding area, so that benefit should be available.
All right, great. So
And CDA and also Birch Street was the ones that did the initial study and survey.
does anyone else have any new business they want to raise with the board? Okay, then why don't, I think that leads us to the public comment portion of the meeting. If there are any attendees here today who wish to share comments, either with respect to items we've discussed or any other non-agenda items, I'd like to invite any individual at this time. Is there any? It doesn't appear we have any. Go ahead, Drew.
But I did have a question going back to the rail yard site, as far as the AMI levels and affordability, and how is that going to be set prior? Are we looking at that necessarily as it pertains to now, or because I know that there's legislation on the federal side basically to change what the AMI levels look like for New York, right? And well, rather Northeast from that perspective. If that passes while this is still in negotiation, how are we pretty much kind of working in parallels, or figuring out whether or not are we looking to set a different AMI levels, just because if you look at that economic development report from Bridge Street to now, everything has increased in the neighborhood. So trying to really figure out necessarily what affordability looks like, and also transitioning that in, given necessarily complexity of coming through COVID and also just the change in demographics of the neighborhoods.
I think it's certainly something we could talk about. Well, we want to talk about affordability levels when we have a community engagement process, get feedback on that. But then with respect to that, I mean, 485X, as you mentioned, was just approved, which is the new tax exemption program, which has a requirement of 25% of the units for this project, it would have a requirement of 25% of the units at 60% of AMI, an average of 60%.
Average of 60%, and none higher than 100.
Which wasn't there when the first phase
Yeah.
with 421A, which offered the ability to go up to 130% of AMI. But now the tax benefits are skewing to much lower AMIs.
But will they have the ability, or necessarily any developer that comes on, will they have the ability to break that down by site, or is that going to be necessarily based off the total
by-
agricultural
It's
numbers?
based on the number, what you're talking about, the kind of the regional, the New York region AMI numbers.
Point of clarification, is B5 still subject to 421A, or what's its status?
It's vested.
It could be
It could
vested
be.
under 421.
Vested, but as I recall from the legislation, they only allowed the extension of the time if
So-
the AMIs were brought down.
2031.
Right. So it's two things, right? It has to be completed by, I believe, you said 2031, and also it isn't applicable to those projects that were doing that option of the 130% of AMI. So they would have to adjust their income levels.
If they take 421A and not 485X, they would still have to use the lower
The
AMIs.
lower
Yes.
cap on
Yeah.
AMIs, right. In other words, they'd have to re-elect in some way, they'd have to sort of.
I don't know the
It's
mechanics of
mechanically,
how
yeah.
the city is
Yeah.
implementing that, but
Okay,
the statute is clear.
so in the end, it's effectively the same, roughly the same constraint. If they continue under 421A.
I don't know if it's, I don't want to say on the
exactly the
record
same,
exactly the same,
but-
but yes. But the
Scratch
point
that.
is
Not
that
the
they can't have
130.
those 130% of AMI units
Got it.
because.
That's really what I
that-
meant.
Is it
That's what-
tied physically? Could you do two, technically, could you do two buildings and transfer the low income off-site?
Under 480, under the tax exemption programs, I think no.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
That'd be. Okay, so we've had no request for public comment, which I believe brings us to the end of our agenda. Does anyone else have anything further before we adjourn? When is what was the next tentative date for our meeting? In September?
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, okay, so. Okay, so please refer back to Debbie's email about the site, about the dates to hold, and then closer to that time, she will issue
I do the polling.
the polling, and then yes, but let's please try to hold those dates in September.
As we have been, if there's, development to bring to the board, we may shift it up earlier
Yes,
in
understood.
recognition,
Yeah.
that we want to bring you in, so we will keep you posted.
Sounds right. I just,
Next time in
I might as well.
In Brooklyn.
But I might as well put on the record that I would be unable to attend a meeting in late July and in Brooklyn, so, or in New York. I'll be out of state.
Fun. Noted.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Grant. Thank you, everyone. Have a great summer.
Small button?
Yeah.
Oh.